What if I told you that money, the thing you're busting your butt to earn, is actually being created out of thin air? I mean, we work hard for every dollar, right? We've been taught that money comes from working, from earning, and from saving, but what if I told you that's only part of the story? Now don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about some magic trick or some wild conspiracy theory here. I'm talking about the very system that controls how money flows in and out of your life, your job, and even your bank account. The system that makes prices go up, that makes it harder for you to make ends meet, and might even be the reason why you're struggling financially right now. Here's the deal. There's a big secret about how money is created, and I'm about to share it with you. We're going to dive into exactly how money is made by the people and institutions in control, and how it's causing the cost of living to skyrocket, while wages stay the same, or worse, get stagnant. And no, I'm not going to get into complicated finance jargon or confuse you with big words. I'm going to break it down for you in a way that's simple and relevant to your daily life. You might be asking, how does this affect me? Well, it affects everyone, especially if you're struggling to make ends meet. Understanding how money is created will help you see the bigger picture. Why you feel like no matter how hard you work, your money never seems to stretch far enough. So if you're tired of just trying to keep up, tired of feeling like you're getting squeezed by inflation, or just want to know why everything seems to cost more, this video is for you. I'm about to explain how it all works, how money is created out of thin air, and why this affects you directly. This is the stuff they don't teach you in school, but I'm here to break it down in a way that's real, that makes sense, and that helps you take control of your financial future. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome to Flourish in Wealth, where financial freedom begins. Now, what if I told you there's a small group of people sitting in fancy offices who can literally make money appear out of nowhere? And no, I'm not talking about magicians or con artists. I'm talking about central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the US or the Reserve Bank in other countries. These guys are like the wizards behind the curtain when it comes to money creation. They don't have a magic wand, but they do have something even more powerful: the ability to create money out of thin air. And no, I'm not talking about printing physical bills and coins, though that's part of it. I'm talking about something much sneakier and way more widespread. Here's the thing. The central bank doesn't just print money whenever it feels like it. Well, they can print physical money, which you'll see in your pocket or at the bank, but most of the money in circulation today isn't even physical. Instead, it exists as digital numbers on a screen. Central banks control how much of that digital money gets created and injected into the economy. Think of it like this. When the economy is struggling or when there's not enough money moving around, the central bank has the ability to add more money into the system by lowering interest rates or by directly creating more money and lending it to commercial banks. This process is often called quantitative easing, a fancy way of saying, let's just create some money and put it out there. Let me explain it simply. Imagine you're playing a game of Monopoly. You and your friends start the game with a set amount of money, but as the game goes on, the bank starts handing out extra money to players. At first, it's just a little bit to keep things moving, but soon, the bank is handing out more and more because the game isn't going fast enough and people aren't landing on properties or buying enough houses. The more money the bank hands out, the more everyone starts buying, and the game speeds up. Hey, if this is starting to make sense, drop the word mind blown in the comments below. I want to hear what you think about how money is created. Next point is what happens at the banks. It's kind of like a magic trick that's happening right under our noses. You see, most people think money is created by the government printing it. And yes, that's part of it, coins, bills, all that stuff. But what if I told you the real magic happens in the banks? Yeah, I'm not kidding. Banks are the ones that create most of the money we use every day. Imagine this for a second. You've got a printer, right? A fancy one that can print paper, but this one's special. Instead of printing a bunch of flyers or receipts, it prints money. You might be thinking, wait, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. And you're right. If this printer was out of control, we'd all be in trouble. But guess what? That's basically what banks are doing. They have their own version of this printer, except instead of using ink, they're using loans. Here's how it works. You deposit $1,000 into your bank account. You think, okay, my money's safe here. But the bank doesn't just hold on to that $1,000 like it's some treasure chest. No, they only need to keep a fraction of it, let's say about 10%. So if you deposit $1,000, the bank might lend out $900 to someone else, and that person will spend that money. Now here's where the magic happens. The $900 that the bank lent out gets deposited into another account. And guess what? The bank can now lend out another 90% of that $900, and so on and so on. This process can repeat itself multiple times, all from the initial $1,000 that you deposited. And here's the kicker. This creates what we call new money. It's not money that was physically printed by the government, but money that the bank has just generated out of thin air through lending. It's like they're multiplying the money that's in circulation, even though it was never really there to begin with. This means that money isn't really as scarce as we think. The banks are literally creating more money every time they lend out a portion of your deposit, and as a result, this new money gets circulated throughout the economy, which can drive up inflation. So the more money the banks create, the less value your hard-earned dollar might hold. You see, when too much money is created without a corresponding increase in actual goods or services, prices go up. The dollar you're working hard to earn might not go as far as it used to. And this, my friend, is one of the reasons why prices keep rising on everything, from food to gas to rent. Now, here's the craziest part. Money isn't just created by central banks or your local bank, it's also created through debt. Every time someone takes out a loan, new money is created. You know how we all hear about how much debt the government is in, or how we rack up credit card bills and loans? Well, here's the kicker. Debt is actually one of the primary ways money gets created. Yes, you heard me right. Debt equals money. When you walk into a bank and take out a loan, whether it's for a car, a house, or a personal loan, you're borrowing money, right? But here's the twist. When the bank gives you that loan, they're not just pulling that cash out of a vault. Nope, they're literally creating that money out of nowhere. Here's how it works. Imagine you walk into a bank and ask for a loan of $10,000. The bank doesn't go to the safe and hand you $10,000 that they've been holding for someone else. Instead, they essentially type in a number into their computer system, $10,000. And that money is now yours. But, and this is key, the bank is expecting you to pay that money back with interest. So when they lend you that $10,000, they're not just creating money for you to use, they're also creating debt that needs to be paid back over time. And here's the thing, this isn't just a small-scale situation. This happens on a massive level all around the world, from governments borrowing to big corporations taking out loans to everyday people like you and me. Here's the real kicker. When banks lend money, it's not just about the loan itself, it's about the interest they charge you. That's where the bank makes their money. For example, if you borrow $10,000, you might end up paying back $12,000, $15,000, or even more over time, depending on the terms of your loan. The more money that's borrowed, the more money that's created in the economy. Now, let's talk about governments for a minute. When governments borrow money to fund things like infrastructure projects or social programs, they're not pulling it from a big pool of savings somewhere. Instead, they borrow from banks or other nations, and they create debt. This creates even more money circulating through the economy. But like individual debt, government debt also needs to be paid back with interest, eventually. But here's where the system gets a little wild. Most of the time, countries don't just pay off their debt. Instead, they borrow more money to pay off the old debt, basically rolling over debt. It's like a game of musical chairs with money. Everyone keeps borrowing, and the money keeps circulating. Now let's bring this back to you and me, the regular folks. When we borrow money from a bank, whether it's for a car, a house, or anything else, we're adding to the total debt in the economy. That's how money gets created on a personal level. And this is why it's so important to understand how much debt is floating around. It directly impacts how much money is in circulation and ultimately, how much things cost. Think of it this way. Let's say you're at a party, and there's a huge punch bowl that everyone's drinking from. The more people borrow from that punch bowl, that is, the more people take out loans or the government borrows money, the bigger the party gets, and the more punch gets passed around. But the problem is, if too many people keep drinking from the punch bowl, and no one's really paying back into it, the punch starts getting watered down. This is inflation. And no one can buy as much with their punch anymore. Debt doesn't just represent what we owe, it's also how money is created. The more loans are taken out, the more money is circulating in the economy. But this comes at a price, because with more money in circulation, the value of that money goes down, and we start to see inflation creeping up. Debt creates money, but too much debt leads to higher prices, making things harder to afford. So, what happens when all this money is created? Prices go up. You see, when more money is pumped into the economy, it doesn't just sit there doing nothing. No, it starts to have a major effect on prices. And this is where we meet the silent thief of the economy, inflation. Now before you start thinking, oh, inflation again, that's just a fancy term, let's break it down in a way that hits home. Think about this. Imagine you're at the store, and you're looking at a loaf of bread. A year ago, that loaf of bread might have cost you $2. But today, you walk into the store, and it's $3 for the same loaf. That's not just a random price hike. That's inflation at work. The value of your money has decreased because there's more of it in the system. So, let's make this a bit clearer. Remember when I said that the bank can create money out of thin air? Well, when they do that, they're not pulling it out of some magical vault where money is sitting quietly. Instead, they're putting more money into circulation. And here's the thing, when there's suddenly more money floating around but the same amount of goods and services available, the prices of those goods and services start to go up. Why? Because there's more demand for stuff but the supply hasn't changed. So, inflation happens when there's more money in the economy than there are things to buy. The prices of goods and services go up because the value of your money decreases. You still have the same $100 in your pocket, but now it doesn't buy you as much. This is why your paycheck might have stayed the same, but your expenses seem to be climbing every year. Gas prices, groceries, rent, they all seem to be going up, right? Well, that's inflation silently sneaking into your life. Here's where it gets real. This whole system, the money printing, the inflation, the way prices keep climbing, it's not just a minor inconvenience. It's actually a massive problem for people who are already struggling financially. Let me explain why. First off, think about how wealth is built. If you're wealthy or even just comfortable, you've likely got assets. Things that hold their value, like real estate or stocks. These assets actually benefit from inflation. When more money is created, the value of real estate and stocks tends to go up. So, for someone who owns a house or has investments, inflation could actually be a good thing for them. Their wealth is growing. But for someone who doesn't have those assets, who's living paycheck to paycheck, the situation is a lot different. When inflation strikes, it doesn't just mean the cost of things like food and gas go up, it means that everything gets harder to afford. Rent increases, groceries get more expensive, transportation costs skyrocket, basically, everything you need to live starts costing more. And here's the kicker, people who are poor usually don't have a lot of wiggle room in their budget. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, there's really no margin for error. Every little price increase hits harder. Maybe you're already scraping by trying to make the rent and keep food on the table. Now throw in a few percentage points of inflation, and suddenly those same expenses, rent, utilities, gas, food, are a bigger chunk of your already tight budget. Think of a single mom working 2 jobs to take care of her kids. She's already struggling to pay for daycare, food, and basic necessities. Then, suddenly, inflation kicks in. Milk that used to cost $2.50 now costs $3. Gas prices rise, making it harder to afford to get to work. Rent goes up, everything she needs just became more expensive. But her paycheck doesn't change. The cost of living rises, but her income stays the same, putting her deeper into the hole. What does she do? Take on more hours, cutting into her already limited time with her kids? Borrow from payday lenders who charge outrageous fees? It's a no-win situation. The rich get richer because they have investments and assets that appreciate in value. The poor, on the other hand, are stuck in a cycle where their income doesn't grow as quickly as inflation, and they often don't have the luxury of owning assets that could help them keep up with the rising costs of living. Inflation doesn't just make things more expensive. For those already struggling, it deepens the divide between the rich and poor. The poor often don't have assets that can benefit from inflation, and they don't have the financial flexibility to adjust when prices climb. It's a constant battle just to keep up, let alone get ahead. So when we look at why things are getting harder for people who are already struggling, this is the big reason. The system is not built to help those who need it the most. It's designed in a way that benefits those who already have wealth, leaving those at the bottom to fight just to survive. But here's the good news. Awareness is the first step. When you understand how the system works, you can start to make smarter choices, whether that's learning how to invest, budgeting more effectively, or finding ways to create your own income streams that aren't as tied to inflation. You can break out of this cycle, but first you have to understand the rules of the game. So now you know how money is created out of thin air, why prices are going up, and why it feels like the odds are stacked against you. But here's the good news. Once you're aware of this, you can start taking control of your financial future. And if you're ready for more strategies to break free from this system, check out my next video right here. It's packed with actionable tips to help you take the next step. Don't miss it.